So welcome everybody to tonight's session with Christina Rodney and The Power of Paperless, Little Shifts to Bring Big Change in Your Classrooms. We're really happy to welcome everyone here on a wonderful December evening to participate in this OTS Connect session. So I'm just going to turn it over to Christina, and she will take it from here. So there you go, Christina. Thank you.
Can everybody hear me okay? Oh, this is a good time to use a thumbs up. Welcome this evening. I'm so glad you're joining me, and I hope everyone has your comfy clothes on and a tea. I know it's getting a little chilly outside, but I guess we've been lucky up until now. My workshop is called The Power of Paperless, and I will explain how where this is coming from and what project I'm dealing with when I'm talking about this. But I'll first just tell you a little bit about me. My name is Christina Rodney, and I gave Mally an unfortunate. I didn't even give her a heads up on my name. It does not look like doesn't sound at all like it looks, and that this is a lesson I have to do with my students every semester. So if anybody's Polish, maybe you can get a sense of how I struggle with my last name and having to teach people that lesson. But I'm a teacher at St. Mary Catholic Secondary in Hamilton, Ontario, and I've been teaching at St. Mary's for about 11 years. And I was teaching adult ed before that. I was teaching ESL. And you have my Twitter handle there, so if you want to follow or message me at any time. I also have my email there, and I'm happy to chat with you if you maybe want to collaborate as a class or ask me questions about what I talk about tonight. Because with this session, it's not going to be so much teaching the tools, but kind of showing you what it looked like inside my classroom and what I'm using, how it worked, what didn't work. So I'll be very honest as we go through to tell you how it went for the students and where they had struggles and where we had some big successes. And it is an ongoing project, so I will tell you how that's going. Oh, and I should say, this is one of, so just in case you hear any barking, this is one of the two dogs that are my fur kids. My human kid is asleep at this time, but the fur kids are still up, and hopefully we don't hear any barking from them. But here we go. For all the resources that I'm going to be sharing tonight, I actually have them on a Google Doc. So if you visit bit.ly after this presentation /Power of Paperless, all of the samples and resources I'm talking about are there. So you'll be able to access them at any time. I will not get rid of that document, but they're all linked, and I've explained what each one is. So they're all in one landing spot for you. So I'm going to just tell you where we're going with this tonight. I know everybody likes to know, like, what are we going to talk about for an hour and a half. So I'm going to tell you why I did it, what it looks like inside our classroom, and where we started or how to get started, perhaps, if you have questions about some of the tools that I'm using, but more about maybe how to jump.
Christina, I think you lost your microphone, but I see it. Yeah, I lost all your sound, Christina, but I see you're trying to speak.
Hello?
Yeah, yeah, we're back. Awesome, thank you.
You can hear me? Okay, thank you, Jody. I appreciate you. Okay, I don't know what happened there. So going on from here, where was I going with that? Sorry, so lost my train of thought there. We got this, and it's a great thing to take a chance, but it's scary at the same time because we didn't know how we were going to go through this or in this huge undertaking. But the reason I did it, to be perfectly honest, is because year after year I see that students more and more are growing nervous about using the technology. We think that they can use their phones, but I think we all know that that does not necessarily mean they know how to use computers well, and I'm seeing that more and more the divide and the gap is getting bigger. And not only that, but it's also creating a lot of anxiety, and I'm going to talk more about that later. But we wanted to really capture or help out the college and applied level students, those students that often get kind of left behind and fall through the cracks. And we were finding more with this happens with our students with a lot of, when we're looking at dealing at learning disabilities in our classrooms and we have so many different needs, it is hard to get to everyone. But this, we thought, could be a way to bridge that gap and to catch more and to be able to help more of the students that are at risk. And I will say that there was a huge improvement, huge gains were made, and I will share some of those results with you and how that worked. But it did involve a lot of risk, of course. And so what our big goal was, myself and my colleagues, we wanted to, these are the core ideas that we were trying to build on. We wanted equity in our classrooms, we wanted engagement. We were trying desperately to get students to collaborate more with more purpose and have them, talk more. It's always a struggle to get students, to talk. In the high school level, they seem to not want to, share as much. They become more withdrawn and nervous about speaking, especially in grade 11 and 12. And so through that, we wanted to empower them and build in, that sense of responsibility that they could do this on their own and that they could feel, empowered when they left us and go on to college or university, whatever their pathway is, that they feel really confident in using tools because this is something they'll need for everything that they do, but they don't necessarily have that confidence. They cannot create online content as confidently as we might think they can. So I'll tell you what it looks like inside the classroom, but what I'd like us to before I get into how this turned out, I have a little quick Google form for you to try. So if you could, and I think Mally, if you have that link, but you can just type into a browser. So we'll take a moment to just go to another web or to another window in your browser and to try this survey, just to kind of get a feel for what we already come, thinking about, what we come to, our classroom thinking about when we see student work. So if you can try this survey, and then once you've completed, if you can give a check mark or a thumbs up, and then we'll go on from there and talk about what we saw. So if everyone can the link is in the chat now. Thank you, Mally. Okay, so I see that about 7 of you have had the opportunity to try out the Google form. And just while we're waiting, if you don't mind, if you could, on my slide that we have right now, if you've used Google Forms before, can you put a smiley face on our screen there? I just put one on there. But just to see if you're using forms in your classroom, just curious. Okay, so I see a few of us are using Google Forms, which is great. And I am curious to, and when we get back to, I'll have more about forms later on, but how people are using them in their classroom. And also whether if our participants here are Google or GAF boards. Our board is not, so Hamilton Catholic is not. It's just I really enjoy using Google tools, so I'm kind of out on my own. We're an Outlook board, I guess, or Office 365 board, but more on that later. So I'm kind of, out on my own. So what I want to quickly talk about moving forward then is what we saw. So I'm just going to share with you the results because web touring at this point is not a good idea, so we won't do that. But I will tell you that out of the responses that I got, 75% of you said it was messy. 12.5 said disorganized, and 12.5 said motivated. When I asked you that, what describes that piece of work that you looked at on the, and I'll click on it here on the left side. And then you said, so 87.5% of you, so overwhelmingly, the majority said that the digital student would be more successful. And so I'll let you in on a secret. The truth is that this is actually the same student, but what ends up happening is, and I think we see this in our classrooms, the work that they do on paper does not translate into what necessarily they're capable of or their best representation of themselves. And what we found when we did this last year, and I'm seeing as I continue the project this year, I did choose to stay on for a second year in this project that I'm doing, the paperless kind of classroom, is that we, when it comes to our applied students, our college students, our students are with LDs, writing is often a struggle when you put pen to paper, and it's really unfortunate because it is not the best representation of their talents or who they are, and it's just another divide. It's another obstacle in them feeling both confident and being able to represent themselves. So, and I'm going to talk more about why then I really did want to move towards more of a paperless classroom, not completely paperless, and I will tell you how the students felt about that too. But this is, starting with the idea of equity. This is one of the biggest pieces for me, was that they felt, we always want our students to feel that they have an equal opportunity, that they can represent their strengths, just as well as anyone else, that they need access to technology. In my school, we have, a varying degree of I guess, affluence. There are some students that have, very little and some students that have a lot, but there are a lot of students walking around without the technology. And, they may have a phone in their pocket, but they do not have, a laptop at their disposal. We are not, we don't have a one-to-one situation at our school or at our board. So this was important for me, that access all the time. I think most of us, might be in a situation where you have to book out the computers and maybe you can get it for 2 periods. And that was, for me, that's the hardest thing, because then you're breaking up that learning, that continuity, and students don't have that ability to develop those skills. And as we saw, my partner and I, we were looking at this last year, and I still see it now, students do not have those basic computer skills. They think, and this actually happened in my class this year, my grade 9 student told me he thought I was magical. And I said, what do you mean? He says, well, do you have eyes in the back of your head? And I said, well, I'd like to think so, but because I was able to type without looking when we were taking up something in class, I was recording their answers in a Google Doc, but because they don't even have the computer skills. And sadly, it's not pushed as much in school anymore. There's not keyboarding for us anymore at our school. So students are not developing those basic skills, and even organizing documents. The biggest, one I find is document 1, document 2. They don't name their documents. They don't organize them into folders. And even that, which we think is a basic level probably for us as teachers, are skills that will help them and serve them well. And so it was starting with something small like that. And that, I think, starts with an online classroom. So if you could grab a, I just forgot the name of it, but if you could grab a smiley face, an icon of some sort. If you are using an LMS or a learning module system, can you tell me which one you are currently using by putting an emoticon somewhere on the page here? If you're using My Class, Edmodo, Google, or maybe you're using something else, maybe you can drop that in the chat. I forgot to include other ones. If you're not using one, perhaps a thumbs down somewhere on the page would also be good. Crystal, because you posted it, if you don't mind, if you want to grab the mic, if you're comfortable, if you have a mic, or if you want to type in the chat, can you talk a little bit about Seesaw or KidBlog? I'm curious. Lauren, if you select a smiley face or an icon from the side, the second one down, there's a menu that will pop out. You can just click on one and then click anywhere on the screen, and it'll post your icon. Okay, so Crystal, you're saying Seesaw is like a digital. Okay, the digital portfolio. Okay, is it much like? Is there a classroom feature though, like with that digital portfolio? Are you able to see all the students, and can they interact at all or comment? Okay, so I see what you're saying. So, and does it have like do you have the ability to put things in folders or post other content like that? Okay, so awesome. Thank you, Crystal. She said that they comment on others, and right, perfect, and you can allow it. So you have control too. It's private. Similar to, so I actually use Edmodo, and again, because our school, again, I guess I've gone rogue. I don't know, but our school uses my class, or I guess D2L as it's sometimes known. But the problem I find right now with D2L, and I know they're doing a huge changeover in we're going to receive it in February when they do go to daylight, is that there's still not enough. I don't have the same amount of control as I do in Edmodo, and it's not as nice looking as Edmodo. I'm not trying to sell Edmodo in any way, but I just find my students love it. It looks like Facebook, which I know some students probably don't even use anymore, but it looks very much like social media, and in that way, the students really like it. But I'm just going to talk about what I'm using. So whatever you're using right now, and what works for you, just some ways that I'm using it and how that might help you. So this is just an example of what Edmodo looks like if you're not familiar with it. But what I love about it and why this has been so instrumental to how I teach and how I communicate with my students and with parents is that there is the option to have a parent code, which I'll show you on the next screen. And I'm not sure if it's the same with D2L and with Google Classroom, but this feature has been so helpful for students that have fallen ill, students that may need extra help at home. Parents are able to see into the classroom. They can have it messaged to their phone. They can set it up so that it messages to their phone and they get an alert. Students get alerts, and I try not to overload them with alerts, but what's nice about this is I don't have to do extra work. It's already done for me, so that when I'm housing it there and I've put out a message, that this is due, or I put it in my class calendar, I know that parents can see it, and I don't have to do that extra piece when students are away, or there's a parent who's concerned. They know now, and I even put that on my report card in our comments on our progress reports, not midterm, sorry, but progress report that we are online, and that just I find saves a whole bunch of problems when we're communicating. But I do love the idea or the ability to be able to organize into, I do it by units, and then we can go back to that, and they can use that easily for studying. Great for online instructions, so I make it explicitly clear how do they hand something in. So if you're already doing this, many of you, but just keeping in mind that if this is something, if you are looking for something else, we've been using Edmodo at our school, not our board, but at our school for many years, and our librarians are on it, so we're able to do researching really seamlessly with the teacher librarian as well. But I want to move on to, on my screen here, is a Google Doc. So if you're using Google Docs, then this will be familiar to you, but if you're using Word Online, then the same results can be achieved. It doesn't matter what you're using, but what's important, I think, and what really helped my students when we were in this process together in this paperless classroom is that it wasn't about a white piece of paper anymore. I had so much freedom to now enhance it, make them links to other content, and because of that, traditional handouts became interactive. And I know, just from going to, it's funny, I went to Bring It Together last week, and or not last week, sorry, last month rather, and I didn't realize there was a term for what I was already doing in class, what I think many of us are doing, but hyperdocs is the new term, or I guess our buzzword. But really, when you're hyperlinking your content, you're really giving your students, and I just found that from my experience that we're empowering the students because they can get to other resources without having to go anywhere else, but just from inside our one document. So what I did was I took a traditional handout that I would ask, and I teach English, I think I mentioned that, but something as simple as, looking for context clues, and, something that would be extremely painful when doing it on paper. Students would not want to have to, sit down, record words. These pages, when I did this online, were filling up like crazy, and I did not have to walk around and prompt students and see if they were focused. Simple little things that I did were, adding color to the chart. Adding in, I actually linked the story so that, and I'll get to that in my next slide, but I linked the content of the story to an online document. I put it in an online Google Doc, and this helped a lot of the students who had vision issues in my class. I also linked the audio, so for those students who wanted to go back and listen again or needed to, hear a certain part, it was all there, and all I did was take a traditional handout and add in a couple links and a little bit of color. And the results, I mean, it was pretty incredible for something that seemed, pretty simple, right? I didn't do much. So what I did was, when we were reading the story of the Telltale Heart, if you're familiar with it, I took the content, I just took the text from online, and I turned it into a doc. I changed the background from black and the text to white, and it had a huge, it was very helpful, rather, for the students who had vision issues in my class. And then I actually found that all the other students enjoyed it too, because it was easier to read, much like, I guess, if you read it on an iPad or a Kobo, with that contrast, and students were able to follow along more easily than just looking at the page with the white background. So something simple that could, benefit some of the other learners in the class who may have, certain learning disabilities, but then everyone benefits from it. And a really easy way to do this, I don't know if people are already doing it, maybe a thumbs up if you already do this, but if you change, the simple thing in Google Docs is to click on page setup and change the page color. And just in that one simple step, it helps so many people, and it just adds maybe a little bit of interest. It changed things up from looking at a white screen, where then you can do so much more from here, but it's just a simple thing. If you're already doing it, I don't know if you are, but it's I don't know, it's one simple trick that, again, like, is one of those little things that makes a big impact. And so I've done it with other things. I'm not, going completely, I mix it up, right? I sprinkle things in. I do traditional things like questions. I do non-traditional things where they're, doing interactive slideshows. But in this case, this was a simple question and answer sheet that we all have. I changed it up a bit, matched it with the color scheme of the text that we were reading, and students were able to more easily answer the questions by typing into the document that had some contrast to it. Very, very simple. And just speaking about hyperlinks, if you're not familiar with this in Google Docs, it's very simple, so I just threw this in here. But to create a hyperlink to any content online, 3 shortcuts. Copy the link, Control-K, Control-V. I do it so often now that it's so much faster to link. You can link it to a shape. You can link it to text. You can change the word and make it say, click here. But something so simple that, students, find it so much easier to just follow an instruction, and, it takes them right to where you need them to go on the web. They don't have to go outside of it. It opens automatically. So the next piece that I want to talk about that was a focus for us was the ability to build in responsibility. Again, something that we take for granted, and I know I was already talking about a little bit, but I want to share a real story of something that actually happened in my class, and this is it. So I had to be away. Actually, I was at a workshop myself, and I had to leave paper because our computers were new. I didn't want to leave the responsibility to the supply teacher of having to unlock the cart. The cart was a little bit tricky, and so I left a paper copy of my handout, and that is an actual picture of my recycling bin. I couldn't be upset about it, I guess, but the truth, because I knew it might happen, because they had been so used to coming in, getting their computer, sitting down and logging in. They all had a computer that was assigned to them, that was numbered for them in this paperless project, and they were so used to doing it that a lot of them just didn't want to do it on paper. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily a good thing. It's not that they can't write on paper, but what we find is, and I think we all maybe find this, is when they're given, too many pieces of paper, if they have too many things to do within all their classes, they're not putting in a lot of input. They get left in desks, they get left behind, or they get left in the recycling bin, and they're just, for those learners who find writing to be a roadblock, this is just something that is frustrating to them, right? But what I did was, instead I took that and I put it online. And this is what I got instead from the student. So what I did was, and I will talk about this in just a little bit, and this is actually my next slide, we created virtual binders, right? Not just a portfolio, but docs that had, that all their links lived in, and where their folder was shared with me, their links were shared with me, and I could easily share out this information to parents, to my administration if I needed to, and my students were more accountable because of it. So if we're looking at my slide right now, that amount of content I hardly ever got in class when I handed out paper. And we're talking about they're interacting with the text, they have to find proof, support, they're citing their work. And so what we have is a lot more output because we're not worried about the borders on paper, we're not worried about handwriting, we're not worried about spelling. And I hate to watch my students struggle who do have some of these LDs where language is the problem, but it's not that they're they have brilliant thoughts, but that pen to paper is the hurdle. And so it was beautiful to see, this is the input that I was getting, or output rather I was getting when they had the device in front of them. And I know this is not going to happen in every classroom, but if we had a few computers, and I do this in my other classes because they didn't all have access to these laptops, a few computers is all you need. One computer is all you need. If you can have one student be the recorder, everyone throws in their ideas, we can always do collaborative note-taking as long as there's one computer in the classroom. And I think that is so powerful when the students can be the creators of the content, regardless of how many computers we have in the room. So our big, question, and I think what part of the project was, I wanted to remove that obstacle of the binder, remove the obstacle of organization, which a lot of the applied students in my applied class struggled with. And I wanted them to have work that they could be proud of. When they look at a whole portfolio from a semester, when they can look at, those Google Docs or those whatever docs you're using, Word, and see how they've grown, and they know that I'm going to be looking at it, they know their parents are going to be looking at it, that it's all right there. It changed everything for us. And that's why, I called it the virtual binder, because it actually got filled with something, whereas their binders were sitting empty or disorganized, and papers were getting left behind. So, my colleague and I, when we were talking about this last year, and what I've been doing, making a conscious effort, is to teach students. I think we forget that they don't necessarily know how to create folders. They don't know how to name their folders. They have, if you look at their accounts, and maybe many of you can attest to this, you look over and they've got document 1, 2, 3, 4, and they have no idea what they worked on, where it went from yesterday. So we have to actually step back, I think, and just teach them some, basic skills that we take for granted. And so when we had a person from the board actually come back and give us feedback, they took a group of our students and recorded them and had them answer questions about the project. And overwhelmingly, they were so happy that we taught them explicitly how to use the tools. We took the time because they said, we don't know how to use them, and now, we needed that. And I think that's something that we take for granted. We think that they know how to use the technology, when in fact, they only know how to use their phones, right, in a lot of respects for, for scrolling and for looking at social media, but not in a sophisticated way to create documents. Small things like learning how to tab and bold, those are all, for some of our students, a struggle, something we have to teach. And so, starting with that, it's almost like you have to start fresh sometimes, per semester or, at the beginning of the year. So that's why I find, too, using the LMS, whatever LMS you're using, I find the more instruction I put when I have an assignment coming in, the better the result. I always attach a template. I always attach a sample. And I think we always, talk about exemplars. And so when we have virtual exemplars, especially if we can co-create them, then that saved so much in the end. We had a lot less, pain in the end, students not knowing what's going on. It's just so much easier. Students, parents, everyone knows what's going on. Online marking has become, something that I've become more comfortable with. I used to love just commenting on paper, but the feedback, the speed that you can give it back with, it's less work for us when we can, track it, show it online. So for me, this has become invaluable. And so, as I was talking about, just making that really explicit, I can, right away I can see how many have turned it in, who's missing it, what's missing. And so something I'll share with you that I tried, and I still do now, is a work tracker. So whatever unit we're working on, I have them create just a blank doc, throw the link to me in they have to upload it on our LMS in our Dropbox. And so right away, as soon as I have that work tracker, whatever that table is I create, and I have their individual document, now I can see in and see where they are. I can see their progress. So in a simple thing too, just to help them track, I used color to break up our two parts of that unit, and they found this to be helpful for some, for some reason, just having that, color block helped to organize some of them. It was a visual cue. So something simple like that can help to bring a focus, I found. And like I said, so here's an example of one that was filled in. I do have this, just as an example for you online, but I can't, this is the student work, so I couldn't share this one with you. But all I had in one click was exactly, what was going on in the unit, how much had actually been completed. And what I found was in my college class, quickly what they realized, because I could see in, they would say, "Miss, oh, don't look yet, I'm not finished." So they were becoming more and more accountable because they knew I had that ability to see in and see where their document was at. And so it made them more responsible just, with a simple thing, which was, handing in that link to their document as soon as they started. Not when they were done, but when they started. And I do this all the time with whatever project they're working on. So even with my grade 9s today, they were starting in on their culminating activity slideshows, had them handed in so that as they're working through the class, I don't have to get up and walk around. I can message them on their document, right? I can use the chat feature in Google and just give them a little, push if I, get back on track, or do you need help with this? You can see it and give them feedback without having to walk around and them feeling like, we're always looking over their shoulder. And so, like I said, going back to the idea of explicit instructions, something simple, right, where you've made it very clear. I know for my students, it's always reminding them to set it to anyone can comment, or if we're doing anyone can edit in Google Docs. The same is true in Word, that making sure that they have set that permission, so you don't have to go back and say, "Oh, you forgot to change this. I can't get in there." So they have to, I make it very, very clear in my posting on Edmodo, or whatever the LMS is. And again, attaching that template, that was really the key factor, because then they can just make a copy. I know it's not necessarily the same in Word. Making the copy is sometimes a problem with copy too, but there are ways around that if you're using Word. But in Google, I think most of you are using Google, it sounds like. It's so much easier, and I love that feature of making a copy. What I always too remember to do is set my template to anyone can view, because you don't want them typing into yours, and sometimes you have to go back and empty that out. So it's just remembering to set it to anyone can view, so we don't lose our work, which is nice though in Google, because you can always go back to restore the original version. I love, again, why I love Google. Just sharing with you an example of something else that I did in class. This is happening right now in my grade 12 class, and this is my grade 12 English. A great way to use a doc I found, and it's, whether it's a work tracker or a landing page. I don't know how many people are using Padlet. How many people are using Padlet? Because I'm curious about ways that you're using Padlet. I know how I use it, but just maybe we'll stop here for a second. If anyone wants to share, I don't know if you want to jump on the mic or in the chat, if you're using, actually, let's do a check mark if you're using Padlet. Can we throw in a green check mark if you're using Padlet? Okay. I've got a few people. Oh, yeah, quite a few people using Padlet. If anyone wants to use the mic or type in the chat ways that you're using it. Right now, just as an example, in my class, I'm using it for each of the chapters, we're reading The Great Gatsby, and for each of the chapters, I have them choose a quotation from each chapter, why they found it to be significant, and they have to pair it with a meaningful image that is not from the movie, but is is a symbol of what they chose, so that they're showing that they understood the quotation, and that actually ends up becoming a great review tool for them, because we have all the important quotations from each chapter, and it was something that they created. So instead of having them go out and post each one to a different place, I actually post one landing page, and I just continue to post all the Padlet links in one spot so that they can go back and easily find them. But how are people using Padlet in their classrooms? So I see. I think, oh, yeah, okay. So when discussing sensitive topics, Lauren, I love this idea, anonymous questions, right? That's what, and there's another tool actually I'm going to talk about in a second that can also help with that idea of anonymity. Categorize things, yes, great ideas. Anyone else? I also see using it for quick responses, yeah, KWL charts. Michelle, Padlet is just a virtual sticky note wall, and it's a great tool. So if you wanted to do like a parking lot of questions, it's great because then you don't lose that paper. It's an online page, and it's free. It's free for us, and they even offer video now, so you can actually post video links with your sticky note on the wall. You can organize the sticky note wall in different ways, so it can stream, it can be in a canvas, you can use it for so many things in class. You can almost use it for like a little virtual classroom wall where you have like your not necessarily maybe class pictures, but like maybe you could have avatars of the students, and maybe if you ask them a question, they post something there, and it really could become a word wall. There's all kinds of things that you can use it for. For me, I've been using it for years. It used to be called Wall Wisher, but it's such an easy tool to gather information, but you can really make it rich, right? It can be something simple, but you can also make it many levels in. I see that Jesse wrote sometimes for students to research. Yeah, class research, right? A key question in a unit. So that'd be a great idea too. If you had a small group, they could all post their research and what they found, the links, because you can link online content, and then kids could fly out from there and then use that research. So I've had students use it for anticipation questions when I'm starting a unit, and like I'd had one when we were reading Brave New World. I remember asking the question, what would be in your utopia? What would be your perfect place? And I got the most amazing answers that I can't get if I ask them to put their hand up in class, right? They don't want to share, but all of a sudden I had 26 beautiful responses, and with meaningful images, and now I've got a conversation starter. So it's a really great tool. And when I was talking about, using it in a paperless classroom, I guess, it was a way to get conversation going for those, students who didn't want to talk in so many different ways. So that brings me to, HyperDocs, which, again, I did not know this was the word for what I was doing, but maybe some of you are familiar with HyperDocs. If you want to throw in a green check mark or a red X if you've heard of HyperDocs before, or if you haven't, I guess. I'm just curious because I only learned of this word this year. Okay, so quite a few people. Okay, so I don't know where I was. I must have been under a rock somewhere. But really, this is an example, and I've shared it with you. I think. Oh, good. Thank you, Anne. I feel like I'm not the only one now. HyperDocs, right? For those of you who maybe don't know, it's just hyperlinking your material. And so I guess way back when, they used to be web quests. I remember learning about those in Teachers College, like a web quest. So I have been doing this, and I guess I'm calling them hyper slides because that's what I do with my slideshows. I put all my content built into my slideshows because I find in a paperless classroom or when we're talking about online content, the linking everything from your slideshow or from a document just makes it easier for everybody, and it's an easy way to go back next year. When I do this unit again, I can make a copy of my slides or a copy of my doc, and then I can start fresh and I can build on it and I can see what we need to add. I have this one for you if you're interested. It is, I hope my link is on there. I'm sorry, Mally, I apologize, but it's in the resource page. Yes, I did put it in the resource page. I just created this year as part of the second year of the project, just as a sample. We're looking at fake news, right? And fake news is the big word right now. Everybody's talking about, I don't even want to get into the Trump side of things, but talking about fake news, we created an activity where, we talk about engaging, exploring, acting on it, and then sharing it out. So there are a number, and it's a very, it can become very sophisticated very quickly, and it depends on, what you want to do with your document. But I love doing this because this is where I can build in independence, and I can build in, the ability for students to work at their own pace rather than me forcing the pace. And so if you're looking at it, we've got, a video that's linked in. It's already embedded where they start off. Then they have to answer a question. Once they've done that, then they're going to view a slideshow that, asks them to look at what fake news really is and how they can identify it. I then built in a quick quiz from a Google form, and I can see if they've understood. So it's a great checkpoint for me, right? Building in those checkpoints. And then they had to find an example of fake news and share that by, there was a checklist that they had to go through. And then they shared it to us on a Padlet wall. And then even below that, I was able to add in resources. And this is, again, why I love the idea of paperless, is because I can give them so much more, and they have so many more resources that they can explore than, me having to be the expert at the front of the room. I can easily link it. And what's even better is I love seeing this. Students then also post other material. They say, Miss, well, I found this. And then we just throw it in to our document, where they can, if we needed other supports, they find them and they become the experts. And how wonderful is that if we're, creating this confidence in them where they can share out and, find some, that little bit of glory, and, I can actually help, in the classroom as well, so they feel empowered, and that was a great thing. And so, if you want to see, I also have an example of this in a slideshow, right? So if I want to do it as a whole class lesson rather than that independent, doing the same thing in our slideshows was, so important in a paperless classroom to be able to, have them go along with us on the journey. So, just an example of something I do, I always build into a slide a place where they can click on the template. I share out the slideshow in my Edmodo classroom online. And, again, if you're away, you know exactly what to do in my class because it's always there for them, and they don't have to feel lost. And I think that's really the benefit too of having our content online. I've realized, I used to think, well, it might be onerous starting off, but now this is the way I teach. I put everything into, if it's a handout, I put it into my slide and I link it. Whether I print it and give it to the whole class or not, they can go back and look at that paper copy online. I often take pictures of anything we do write in class, capture it, put it in the slideshow, show it on the document camera. It's important to also capture the writing. I'm not trying to say, this is about not writing, but that if we can make it available to them to look at again online, that chart paper that we write on, ends up collecting dust somewhere in the back of the classroom where it gets recycled, where if we capture it and put it into our virtual space, then they will go back. And I have seen, I've watched the students go back and look at that. And I've seen the results because they've actually gone back to look at what we've created in class. So I think, the goal is to remove those barriers, that it's not, my thing is it's not a toy, it becomes a tool. And, they became so comfortable by about the third, fourth week of class that, they stopped complaining, because at the beginning they were complaining this, I don't know how to make the link, I don't know where to go for this, but then they became experts very, very quickly and were helping each other out. And it was, it was incredible, because now I know when they leave that they have that confidence. They can create content online, they can represent themselves well, and they don't have to be embarrassed about, their handwriting or their spelling, because they can do it well. When they, have the ability to use the tools. So the other piece, another important piece for us was engagement. And I know that this is the biggest struggle, I'm sure, for many of us. How do we gauge whether they're interested or whether they're understanding? And this was another reason why I really appreciated, using these tools. So something I do which we would maybe do with questions, I've tried doing it with a Google form. I call them reading checkpoints, so that, rather than having to say, okay, do 5 questions or 10 questions on this chapter, at a certain point, I would say, okay, and it would be right in the form, read to this page, read the, page 5 to page 10, and then answer this question. And I was able to gauge, very simple, this is very simplistic here, but, how many people understood what they read. And so I had various points in the chapter if they were reading independently. And it could be for, anything that you're working on in your class. I used forms in this way to capture their understanding. Did they understand? And if there was a major thing that they didn't understand, I could go back and address it the next day. And once you start using forms, if you're not using forms, you realize how quickly you can create a form. It doesn't have to look really pretty, but it serves its purpose, because the data that we can get from that is so valuable, and it's just so quick when we can see it in one click. I use it a lot for quizzes. I'm sure many people do. I love the idea that I can have something marked for me in a lot of cases. Excuse me. But also, it's great to see the feedback. Now, forms has changed a lot, where we have so much information coming to us with the bar graphs and being able to export this. It's really been instrumental in giving me, a feel of, maybe that question that I wrote was terrible. Maybe I wasn't as clear, or maybe students really don't understand that concept, because I see that, 10 out of the 20 did not get that correct or struggled with that. So I think forms can do a lot for us. That online quiz can do a lot for us in terms of giving us feedback. And it also gives the students the opportunity to, if you have that short answer question or a long answer question, again, using the tool online, it's not a time factor in terms of writing or struggling with, spelling. So I really do appreciate those features. I'm just wondering, how many people are using forms for the quiz feature, maybe with a green check mark, and maybe your experiences, or how you've, maybe it's changed the way that you teach. If anyone wants to share, feel free to grab the microphone or type into the chat. I see that a few people are using it for quizzes. So Madison, you're saying just for feedback, okay. And I know that for a while I was using it just for feedback, but I found too with using it for quizzes, the idea, that feature of being able to randomize the questions to shuffle the order helps a lot too, because sometimes we worry about our students cheating, but that was a great feature. That's just one thing. So Anne says, sorry, I missed that, the chat's going so quickly. Anne says where did it go now? I just lost it. Oh, for documenting comments. Oh, that's a neat idea. Anne, can you, I don't know if you have a microphone, but do you want to speak any more about that? You said you're using it as with a Chromatat extension.
Can you hear me?
I'm not sure if Anne's, but Angie, I just want to comment on what you're saying too, which I love.
Yeah, we can hear you.
With quizzes, if you're not using them, and maybe this will be an inspiration to get us, because a couple of people have mentioned this. What's nice is when you can set it so they see their answers immediately, and that each question can get specific feedback. And I love this. It takes me a little longer when I prepare the quiz, but then at the the end goal, where I don't maybe have to mark individually and I get those marks back, the bigger win here is that the students feel like, oh, we've already taken it up. Yes, I know where I went wrong. And I've had students say to me, I love that I just found out how I did automatically, right? Because they want that instant gratification as much as we all do when certain things. They want to know, how did I do? They don't have to wait. Because depending on if somebody's away, if somebody's sick, then I didn't, then I have to wait to hand back, paper quizzes. And that has been, another one that really it's so helpful in the students getting that immediate result and knowing where they went wrong. Madison said, depending on the quiz, yeah. So yeah, what I do is actually, to avoid the kind of instant messaging too, I actually have the students take their computers and face the back of the room. so that I see all the screens. So when we're working on laptops, I'm looking at all the screens. And they're a lot more hesitant to, do anything that they shouldn't be doing. So that's just one thing I've done. I don't know if it works for anybody else, but just have them turn and face the back as just a way of trying to combat that feeling of needing to cheat. But I think we can never prevent that, whether it's paper or paperless, but depends on what you're doing. Another I used them last year when I started this project, and how I've used Google Forms is also to, use a visual prompt. So it could be, because you can put video in here or an image, then it also can, be rich in content that, they're doing a little bit of. You could do a flipped lesson like this, which would be great, and they come in the next day with a lot of questions based on what you posted for them. So another idea would be using this for the flipped classroom if you're dabbling in that. But it's great in giving them that extra support, enriching whatever it is that you're reading in class or whatever lesson you're working on. So I've used it in that way as well. But I want to talk about something that I only discovered, and I was hesitant because I just learned about it yesterday, so I threw it in because I tried it out, and I'm excited to share this with you. I don't know, has anyone heard of, and if you could, with a green check mark or a red X, have you heard of PairedX? Because I'm super excited about it, but that's just me. Madison says yes. Okay, awesome. Nathan says yes. And a couple of people, so nope, and I just want to share why I'm loving this. And Nathan, I'd love to hear from you too, and Madison, because I literally just started using this Monday, and I threw it in here because I wanted to talk about it because it's going to be great for, I think, a lot of the lessons that I'm doing. I'm going to use it all the time, to be honest. But it's an add-on to Google Slides. I think you can use it in other platforms as well, but I know for sure in Google Slides. And all you do is simply go into the Chrome store, or you click on New from your Drive and connect more apps. All you do is click on PairedX. It's free. There are some premium features, but I don't care. Don't need them yet. You can ask polling questions. You can do a warm-up question. You can do thumbs up, thumbs down. You can actually have them draw on a graph if you're using it in math. You can have them plot a point to see like hot or cold. It's really neat, and there's no work involved. So you could take an existing slideshow, not use slides. You could have an empty slide and just put in the PairedX slides. It's an extension. It's amazing. So all I did was I tried this out, and I asked a rather big question in Gatsby, and I said, considering what we know about archetypes, how can we predict Gatsby's death? My screen, when I posted this to the class, because you just click on Present with PairedX, the screen just filled up with answers. If I had asked this by saying, put up your hand, I understand that, this is talking about a grade 12 university class. This is happening in my grade 12 university class. But I don't know if this is happening in your classrooms. The older the students get, the less willing they are to speak. And so all of a sudden, I had 20-something, messages on my screen. I was able to show it to the class, and a discussion sparked from here. Like I've never experienced from such a simple thing. I asked a follow-up question to this was, what they thought about Gatsby's character, and it was either, it was an agree or disagree, and suddenly we had this big discussion. The bell rang. We didn't even get to finish. And for me, as a teacher, I now know that they're engaged, and it was huge. And it's something so simple. So I don't know if Nathan, you want to talk about how you use it, or Madison. But then I'm going to give you an opportunity. I would really love you to just go out and watch this. There's a quick video that Mally put the link in, just if you want to see what it's about. It's like a 45-second video, so you could get an explanation of what's going on. And I think it's just going to be invaluable in getting student participation in my classroom. I know I'm going to use it all the time. So if you'd like to, this is what the video will look like down at the bottom here. If you'd like to take a minute, and then when you're back in, after you watch the little promo video they have there, when you come back in, if you can just give me a green check mark to let me know that you are back with us, that would be great. if you're back in with us, if you want to just use that green check mark, and I'll know if we can move on. Okay, so I think that most of us are back now. Not sure if Michelle and Sheila are still watching. So I'm going to move on, and just keeping in mind that I think what, we as teachers are so overwhelmed with so many, different things in our school day that it's important that we just, think about how can we just take something we've already created and just put it online and perhaps, tweak it in a way that it's more accessible for our students, or, if we've built in some other pieces, whether it's like links to something, those hyperdocs, but just that ability for the students to access it really does have so many benefits. And what I tried out last year in terms of, when we were looking at paperless, I thought, okay, I have to take something I did before on paper. Now how's it going to be more meaningful? I don't want to just, necessarily take a handout just for the sake of saying it's paperless. I want it to be, more meaningful. How can I do that? So I love Google Drawing. It's one of my favorite tools. And, for something like a graphic organizer. And why is this so beneficial? Well, what I found was, when you take a graphic organizer that's on paper, again, those boxes, don't expand when you're pen to paper. But online, we can expand them. We can link them to other content. And one example, I was talking about the idea of suspense. And I don't know if it's gotten any better for, does anyone know? Better now? Does anyone have, okay, maybe that got turned off. Awesome. Okay, so I'm not sure if the mic was on, but we're good, I think, now, yes? Okay, so for example, this is just a graphic organizer. We were looking at the story of King Midas in my college class, and a very, a tough topic, situational irony, right? It's not necessarily, something easy to understand, but by taking, what I might have put on, in a few lines on paper, now I've done it in a way that shows a build-up, and I've used the arrows as a way, as a signal, right? Something simple like a shape, and the graphic and the way that you create it can give them more of a leading, a direction, but it also, it's interactive. It gives them a way to create and look at a topic that maybe, might not necessarily be exciting for them. I realize that English, they have to take it, so they don't necessarily want to be in the, college or university English, but, it's that requirement. So I feel like I have to sell myself sometimes in that way, and so it's important that, I can have them engaging with that lesson in a way that they see it differently, and it's not, it's more accessible, right, for everyone. And that's why I want to talk about where collaboration became a huge piece of what we were doing. I really wanted to see that the students weren't just creating for themselves, but working together, because they will have to do this when they go to college, when they go to university, when they're, in the workplace, and I wanted them to be able to do it in a meaningful way. I wanted them to be able to do, meaningful peer editing. I wanted them to be able to build slideshows together, be able to take notes together interactively, something they can do, whether, if they're in a lecture, if they're in, a class with their, a professor, or, whatever it is. I want them to feel that they can do that quickly and seamlessly and feel confident. So what I found really valuable is I could take a simple slide and use it as a parking lot. So if I shared my slideshow with them, oftentimes I would make it editable. I would set it to anyone can edit, and I would have them drop in a question, and a little bit different, use a shape, drop in a question, and suddenly I have a parking lot, a virtual parking lot, that we can go back to in that chapter. For me, it was in this chapter of this novel that we were reading. And then we actually had a way to go back to. I think that's the beautiful thing, is that we could always go back to and see where we came from and how we grew, and what needed to be answered still in terms of what we were studying. So imagine, whatever you're doing, if it's in math or if it's in science, and you can go back and look at those questions that you started off with, and did we answer them? Can we answer them? What's really missing, if it's in our geography or our history. So another one was, we parked as a group, we parked questions, and suddenly I had students going back and looking at questions, and I thought this was amazing. They wanted to see what everybody else had posted. So they were checking in to see what their fellow, what their peers were thinking about. And so I can also see, how engaged they are. the quality of the questions that they're asking. And so, something simple as, a parking lot. Another one I did with them, there's a question in this novel that they could ask this one character, Scarla, any question, but they only get one question. And I wanted to see what they were thinking about. So I just used a simple Google form from my slide, and it was amazing to see the level of thoughtfulness that was going on. And I used this example from James, who never spoke in class. But as soon as I gave him this, opportunity in a platform like this, I had, he says, how do I get out with my memory and sanity completely intact? Well, that tells me that James was really listening, and he was really engaged in the text. And I would never have been able to measure that if I hadn't asked something simple like this in a Google form. Another example, small group tasks. I love, now I do this, often, where I will use a simple slideshow and use it as my landing page for my small group tasks. And I can put all the content, all the instructions. I share out the slideshow, and they know what to do. They know how to go back and look at it. And so in our grade 9 applied class, we look at right now the hero's journey, and they're analyzing short films. So I selected a bunch of short films, animated films, and they had to track the hero's journey through a film that has for the most part, no dialogue. And they're capturing using screen captures, they're using our slideshow, and they're looking at the 12 stages in Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. So I can build everything in, getting their minds on. There's the video that links to the Matthew Winkler TED Ed Talk. By the way, another thing I love is, the TED Ed Talks. I'm sure lots of you use them in your classroom, but those animated TED Ed Talks are amazing. And so then a great thing that I was able to do is from a slide, I put all of the links to the films in one spot, so they don't have to go out searching for anything. Everything is, again, it's seamless. It saves time. It saves confusion. It saves me having to run around from computer to computer. And then from there, they were able to make a choice. They had to vote, and their group picked from these films which ones they wanted to do. And I created a Google Doc. So here you're looking at a Google Doc of each of the groups, and they had to throw in their link to their slideshow. So now they're working collaboratively in this landing page. All they do is click, they come to class, they get into their slideshow, they start working, and it saves so much time when nobody's having to log in individually, day by day. It's all there, and I again have eyes into each of their presentations, so I don't have to go around and to see if they're on task. I can see it right away. I'm able to, drop in my instructions really quickly just as a quick review, so they don't have to go back through the slideshow. Everything is in one spot, and they're able to just start working. And I think really this has helped to, save a lot of pain and time for everybody, because they know exactly what they need to be doing. And again, something simple as, color blocking keeps them organized. I just wanted to share with you because I'm so proud of these guys, and these are my grade 9s coming in. And so just an example, right, of, this was a student in my class who, again, had some, on paper, some issues, but put the computer in front of him, and he just showed off his expertise. I asked him for one picture, he gave me 3. He blended them together, he, color coded, he highlighted what was important and how it linked to the title. So simple, it's a simple thing, but what they are able to create and how empowered they feel, just made me feel, so good for them, because I could see that they were confident. And when they came up to present, they presented with confidence, which I think is so difficult right now in the climate that we're in 2017. This is another example from a film. It's a fantastic little short film called The Present. If you haven't seen it, it's one of those ones I think that all students should watch. It's the message at the end is incredible. I don't know if anybody's watched or seen The Present, but it's got a huge surprise at the end, and it's one I think that all students should see if you have a chance to show it in your class. It's like 6 minutes long, I think. It does need Kleenex, Mally. Thank you. I definitely cried, and I cry when I show it to my students too. But it's a beautiful message that, like I said, just something to take away if you haven't seen it before. But again, I know you're looking at what looks like a simple slide, but it's very sophisticated. This student, captured. They had to do all screenshots. These were not on the web, so they would screenshot that moment in the movie. So they're analyzing, they're pulling out information from that movie where they think that part of the hero's journey is. They're using it in a sophisticated way. They're doing a very brief summary here because they had to present the information, but they had to, he's done some shading here. He's had to do a lot of work in the slide to make it look professional, and this is one of the students in my class who, again, I go back to this is another one, and like my heart, is happy just thinking about it. He struggles with writing. It's incredible to see how, he puts in so much time and effort when it comes to writing, but then in an instant like this, he shone through in terms of his abilities, and it was just incredible. This is, now again, this is more sophisticated. This is on the other end. This is my 4U's again. But really nice was an ability to, in a slide, do a close reading. It's amazing, to capture this where I'm not getting it on paper. And I can say that when I walked around, my grade 12s, we expect they're university bound. Oh, they're going to do the work. But a lot of them have, blank pages in front of them because they're just, I don't know what's happening. But when I put it in front of them and they have to do it as a collaborative slide that they know the class is going to see, the work gets done quickly and in one period. In one period, they were analyzing, they were commenting, they were creating a thesis statement, and that's just because they were able to quickly collaborate online and pool their answers. It was, it's amazing to see how much stronger they become the more we've done this, the more that I have them using the tools. And really what we want is we want to grow that connection, that they're connecting to not just our classroom, but outside of our classroom, that they're connecting to others. And we're always asking them for this part to make connections. And so this was another big piece that we wanted to accomplish in our classroom when it came to using the tools, the technology so often. So how could we capture this in terms of activities? So I think what's great is with an online document, it automatically can become richer. It doesn't mean it will, but if we push it that way, if we model it that way, then it can become a lot richer because we can embed activities that extend their learning. And so I'll give you an example. In my grade 11 college class, again going back to King Midas, often we want them to make connections, but then when we say connected to something, it has to be, I think, very focused. So what I did was I took something simple, like, I said, in the story, we know that King Midas is greedy. I won't read this whole thing to you, but what I asked them to do was make a connection, two modern connections to how society is blinded by greed. And so for each of the examples, they had to find an article or a story that illustrates the idea. So they had to share with me the link to the articles so they could do a quick web search, and then they had to explain why that was, how they made that connection to King Midas. Now, so I'm going to show you an example of a student who was very vulnerable in my class, and I got very little output from if I did give him paper. So I know it's not going to look like much to you, but it is a lot to me because I know what he was struggling with. So just as an example, it was something so simple in a chart, but here I have it, right? He's got an example, and I've got written output, and I can see that he's made the connection, and he's made a very good connection. He says, much like when King Midas is sitting in his chamber with all the gold, he still wants more. Trump has a lot of money already and doesn't want to give up running his businesses because he wants more money. He's made the connection. He's made a valuable connection, and I think that is, again, now it's been captured. It's something that he can go back to. He was proud of, and his work got better and better and better. But it's now I have something that we can share, we can speak to, and he's been able to demonstrate his learning in a way that didn't happen necessarily when if he had to write this on a paper test. So this is all, leading towards what I think is so important right now, and what I'm noticing more and more, and I'm wondering, if it's the same in your classrooms, but we have a real problem at our school right now. We're facing an epidemic of mental health issues, and students becoming extremely anxious, not wanting to present. Anxiety is just, keeping some of them home from school, and it's becoming a huge problem. more so than ever before. And so what comes with being able to use the technology well that I've found is that students are becoming more resilient. Students are becoming more proud of what they've created. Students are more willing to get up and talk in front of the classroom. And so I want to share this result with you. This was from one of the assignments, and it was huge for me. So in the college class I had last semester, 28 students had 12 IEPs, 26 submitted on the first try. So that was 93% success. And those are numbers that I have, don't typically get. And so for me, it was a huge win because I've never had, we worry about things being handed in late, not getting handed in at all. And by simply giving them the opportunity to use the tool, I had a huge success rate. And it was, it was actually the first time at the end of the semester I didn't have any students fail the course. So there wasn't that hurdle. Being able to use the technology as a support, as a way to show off their talent, it had measurable results. This was not just something that was talked about, but it was measurable. And I think that really what's important for me is I'm able to give, if I'm using a Google Doc, I will actually, when they're working on an outline and they share those links to me at the beginning, I'm able to comment as they're going. So I can help them before they have that final, where they're going to get the mark on something. I'm able to catch them, to help them, to kind of move them along. And it's very timely, right, when we can do those comments. And it's so easy because I can see into into their space, and I don't have to run around and, conference with them on paper. They can give me, that work more quickly, and therefore I can give them feedback quickly before, it's too late and they don't, they're stuck somewhere. They don't do any work because they're stuck. I can give them a little comment and help them move along. So I think, this is I've just kind of put it into words because I think, and I'm just curious if this is something that we're also seeing, like you're seeing in your classrooms. I think that it's not just about the fact that they can't use the technology, but that they're so afraid of being judged on social media. So I think if we can help them create that media, if we can help them to be a good presence online, then we can help them to actually use it for learning and not be so afraid to use it. Is this something that you're finding at your schools right now if you are teaching high school? I don't know if this is happening in elementary as well, but I'm just curious if this is something that's a problem for other people at their school. So maybe with maybe with a check mark, if you're seeing this in your classroom as well, can I get yeah, you see it in, okay, so Judy, throw a comment in if you want to. It doesn't have to be necessarily a check mark, but yeah, other people are seeing this as well. And I really find, I don't know what the solution is, but I think this could be one part of it is, is teaching it. And so I want them to use it as a tool, and I think I want them to feel like when they get up there to present, and maybe they are more likely to present when their product, has that feel to it, that they can be proud of what they've created, and that they've gotten that intervention or that help. They are so afraid to take those risks, as you said, Nathan, and I found that the technology is helping them to actually now take more risks the more that they're using it. So, whether it's, one computer in the classroom or a set of computers, the more that they can add in their feedback, if they can do it anonymously or, by, showing their work, then really they're becoming more and more comfortable. And some of the examples, this was, again, I go back to, this was a grade 12 class. I can't get the kids to talk necessarily all the time, but I force them, and so to get up and present, because I let them create slides every single day almost about the content that we're doing in an ongoing class slideshow. So, for chapter 1 or for a unit, I just have them add slides each and every day so they get more and more comfortable. And this is the output I'm able to get now, not at the beginning. This was not in September, but now, because they're so comfortable with it, they're showing their thinking on a bigger scale. They're showing, cause and effect. They're showing that they've been able to, find proof and support it. So they're adding to those ideas, and this is something that my grade 12s hate me for, but hopefully they'll, appreciate it later. But I force them to write thesis statements every day because now they're able to do it on demand. Now they're able to think, and it's just using the simple slide they're able to throw that content in, make it look good, and present it rather than just being, thrown on the spot. If you can get them to type it, right, then they have the ability to, spell check it, look at their diction, and then it's up on the screen and it takes the pressure off of them being the center of attention because there's something to look at. Something as simple as that. And, really it's a way to capture those ideas and show how we grow. So this was an example. They did their own close reading, very quickly, showing a before or after. Something, again, showing that thesis. They're showing, that they've created this little equation to say, because they know what's coming, they're showing that idea of foreshadowing. So capturing a sophisticated idea in a short period of time, they can do this and present it confidently. This is an example from my grade 11 class last year using Google Drawing. I had them do a movie poster for the book because there is no movie for this book that we were reading. And this came from a girl who, again, she's another one who was not a talker in class, but her talents, were hidden, and we were able to show this to the class. She created this poster using Google Drawing. It looks like something right out of Photoshop or Publisher, but she used Google Drawing and was able to create this movie poster. And again, when I show it to the class, all the students were like, "Who made that? Oh my goodness!" They got all excited, and they wanted to know how she did it, the skills that she, what skills she used or how she did this, that, and the other thing. And suddenly there's a conversation happening. She becomes an expert and she feels empowered. And the possibilities in Google Drawing are limitless. And I think it's amazing because this is a free tool. It's one of my favorites. I use it to create handouts. I use it to create, graphic organizers. I use it for everything. And what's nice is, even on the side, you can just we did something, maybe that maybe people didn't think to do, but it was using the side notes as a place to capture documentation. Oh, I see Angie. Maybe Google Draw can be the next. I'd be happy to do a Google Draw webinar because I think it's just an amazing tool, and you do need some time to get comfortable with it, but when I let my students use it, I'd show them a sample, and then of course they'd surpass mine and show me like all the things they could do, and I'm like, amazing. Now we have more teachers in the classroom. So it's an amazing tool, and yeah, I'd be happy to share more on that in another webinar. But here's an example, right? I took questions from Hamlet. This is a big play, and students, have trouble with this scene. So what I did was I created it in a Google Drawing to give them a little bit of a graphic. I think you need to have fun sometimes, right? So it's something simple as where they have to record their answers in the shapes, and I've given them the guiding questions. So, it's something very, very simple that, can be turned into something just a little bit more productive if you've given them some visuals. I'm a visual person. I need visuals. So, I think if it helps some students, then, great. And I'm going to show you, this is what I'm going to end with, because for me it was a big, big win. And it's just another example of how I was able to capture that engagement, that understanding, that empowered learner. So I'm just showing you an empty template here. It doesn't look very exciting. It was just, I told them you had to show how the narrator in the Telltale Heart, by the end of the story really became mad, and he launched into insanity. So I gave them this. And this student who, again, this was another one who wasn't a big talker, and here's the reveal. This is what he created. This is, again, using Google Drawing. And you just explain maybe a couple of things that were happening here. They had to pair it with a visual. He took each of the quotes and highlighted in the quote why it connected to his visual. And each of his quotes clearly shows his understanding of how the narrator went from being sane or appearing to be sane to be completely, insane. And this was a sophisticated, I believe, level 4, showing his ability using that tool. If I had given them this on paper, if I were to just give them this, then I don't think I would have ever gotten something like this. And so this was a real demonstration of what he was capable of, and it was something he was incredibly proud of. His fellow classmates, a couple of his buddies that sat beside him, you know, how did you do that? I want to know how to do that. And suddenly they were talking about the story in ways that I didn't expect, right? It's, you know, it was way more meaningful because he had something he was proud of. And that's, I think, what we want for all of our students, to feel that empowerment, to feel like they've created something that they can talk about. And that just means, you know, the classroom becomes more welcoming and a place where they want to be. And so what I think, you know, this is just a little model that I think that worked for me. I wasn't afraid, and starting at the bottom here, I wasn't afraid to model it. I was not afraid to make mistakes because I know there's going to be somebody in the classroom who can show me how to do it better. But I think important was always having a template, and the students did give me that feedback. They did really appreciate having a template and having a sample where possible. But I think it's important to always allow them to collaborate. You know, sometimes, you know, it takes a little bit for them to get over, like, you know, wanting to collaborate online, and then they get so used to it that it's second nature. And so I think at that point, what I was able to let them do at the end of the semester was I let them choose what tools they wanted to use. And it was amazing to see the different ways they took the tools that we had used and then they, you know, morphed them together, they mashed them together. They were creating products that they were proud of. And like I said, I think the biggest, you know, telling feature was I didn't have any students for the first time in a long time that lost their credit, you know, because they weren't handing in work. They were handing in the work and they were proud of their work. And it was a beautiful thing to see. So before I, you know, turn it over to any questions, the one thing I will say is they didn't always like having no paper. So when they did speak to our representative of the board, they said we don't mind having, you know, they did want sometimes a paper copy to look at. So what I have, how that has informed my teaching this semester is I blend in paper copies of certain things. So once we do if we fill something in as a class collaboratively, I will then print it out and they have that as a paper copy to look at. So rather than, you know, giving out a handout, I'll have them fill in the answers together and I'll print the filled out version from the student work so that they've all been a part of creating that note, and then I hand them their created, you know, their collaborative note. And that's worked really, really well, is for them to have some, you know, paper and to not just be completely paperless. I think, you know, myself, I like paper too. I like to have a paper copy sometimes. So if it was for a review, we create the review online, they co-create the reviews for everything, and then I would give them those completed notes that they were, you know, part of. And so, you know, it's finding a balance. But I'm really, you know, as we're kind of working through it, it's great to see how much they're feeling empowered by having that ability to just use the tool and it just come in, grab the laptop, feel confident, whatever it is we're doing, and whether it's, you know, one expert in the room or, you know, all of them. And it's great to have that. So this is where I kind of, I'm at the end. So if you have questions for me, I'd love to hear them, or if you want to share something, you know, that you thought of along the way that you're doing, I'd love to hear from you. I'm always learning and love to hear from other teachers and what they're doing in their classrooms. So if you would like to take the mic or drop in a chat, it's there for you. And I really do appreciate having you with me here this evening and coming to learn with me.
So Christina, that was great. Really awesome to see all those examples. Oh, there's a question for you because I was just going to go on, so we'll maybe give you a couple.
Hi, Lauren. I just saw your question there. So yes, my marks are, we use knowledge, thinking, communication, and application. So we do have those 4 categories, plus we have our culminating activity as a category in our exam. So yeah, it is, I did notice the marks went up in the thinking, like it was a marked improvement there, which was interesting, and also in the communication, which was nice to see. So in the end, I guess it resulted in everyone doing better in terms of, you know, the pass rate, but there was marked improvement in the communication and in the thinking.
And I think,
I think too, if we're doing online assessment only, yeah, it does become problematic with the communication piece, I think, and you can, it gets tricky with the thinking. Are they, is it their content if we're worried about like plagiarism? I know with D2L, it does run it through to check for plagiarism, but I know with Edmodo we don't have that feature, so I still ask for process work, and that's why too I'm marking or trying to document with process work, and sometimes I will do paper copies in that way. Do I find it difficult to track with each category? Well, because we use rubrics, we always attach the rubric, and the rubric, it's pretty clear for them in those categories. So I always attach, the rubric in advance, and that seems to help.
Okay, just in looking at the time, I'm sure that if people have other questions, Christina, are you?
If there are any more questions, then I just want to thank you again for joining me, and hope you enjoy the rest of your evening.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm just going to finish up with just a couple of things from OTS. So the first one is we have a feedback form that we would really appreciate if you could fill that in. And there's 3 ways to get to it. One way is by simply logging out of the Blackboard room, and it will take you directly to the feedback link. And once you've done that, you will be able to download a certificate for your professional portfolio. The second one is by...
Thanks, Angie, for your comment. I hope it was worthwhile, and good luck.
Oh, sorry.
Thanks,
Can you
Lauren.
hear me, Christina?